Richard could not move, could not speak. The rain continued to pour down on the cemetery, but he barely felt it anymore. His eyes stayed fixed on the photograph in the girl's shaking hand. "I don't understand," he finally managed. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Distant. Hollow. "Rebecca never told me about any children." The twin holding the paper stepped forward. She was slightly taller than her sister, with the same haunting blue eyes. She wanted to. She said she tried so many times. But the shame was too heavy. That's what she wrote in this letter. She held out the paper, now soggy from the rain. Richard took it with numb fingers. The handwriting was unmistakable. Rebecca's flowing script, the way she always made her capital letters too big, the way her sentences carved upward at the end. "My dearest Katie and Molly," the letter began. Richard's vision blurred as he read his dead wife's words. She explained how she got pregnant at 16. How her parents forced her to give the twins up for adoption. How she spent 20 years trying to forget, to move on, to build a new life. How the guilt never left her. When the cancer came back, the Shorter twins said softly, she said it was God's way of giving her time to make things right. She hired people to find us. It took her 2 months, but she did it. "We were in a group home in Providence," her sister continued. "The adoption fell through when we were 7. We've been in the system ever since. Mama Rebecca visited us 4 times before she got too sick." Richard lowered himself to the ground, his legs unable to hold him anymore. He sat in the mud, the letter clutched in his hands, trying to process information that seemed impossible. "She told us about you," the first twin said. "She said you were the kindest man she ever knew. She said you saved her when she felt broken. She said if anything happened to her, we should find you here, on this day. She said you would help us," her sister added. "She said you would understand." Richard looked up at the 2 girls. Their faces were pale from cold and hunger. Their clothes hung on their thin frames. They stood in the rain like ghosts, like pieces of Rebecca he never knew existed. "What are your names?" he asked. "I'm Katie," said the taller one. "This is Molly." "How long have you been waiting here?" The girls looked at each other. 3 days, Molly admitted. "We ran away from the group home. We didn't know when you would come, so we just waited." 3 days. In the cold. In the rain. Waiting for a man they had never met because his dead wife told them to trust him. Richard stood up. His mind was still spinning, but his heart knew what to do. He thought of Rebecca, of her kindness, of how she always saw the best in people. He thought of the secret she carried for so long. He thought of these children, alone and desperate. "Come with me," he said. Richard's Range Rover felt too warm after the cold cemetery. The twins sat in the back seat, wrapped in the emergency blankets he kept in the car. They did not speak. Neither did he. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm as he drove through Boston's morning traffic toward his Beacon Hill townhouse. His mind kept circling back to the same questions. How could Rebecca have kept this from him? When did she find the time to visit them? Why did she not tell him before she died? But he knew his wife, knew her tendency to carry burdens alone, knew how shame could make people hide the parts of themselves they thought were unlovable. He had loved her completely, but maybe not enough to make her feel safe sharing everything. "She talked about you all the time," Katie said from the back seat, breaking the silence. "She showed us pictures. Your wedding. Your house. She said you built computers that help hospitals." "Medical software," Richard said automatically. "My company designs systems that make patient care more efficient." He glanced in the rearview mirror. "What else did she tell you?" "That she met you at a charity event," Molly said. "That you were the only person there who asked the waiters their names. That you donated $500,000 that night and did not even want recognition for it." Richard remembered that night. It was 7 years ago. Rebecca had been volunteering at the Children's Hospital fundraiser. She wore a blue dress. She smiled at him like he was someone worth knowing. "She said you made her believe in second chances," Katie continued. "She said you never judged her past. Never made her feel less than enough." The words hit hard, because Richard had not known there was anything to judge. Rebecca had told him about growing up poor, about struggling through college, about working 3 jobs before landing a teaching position. But she never mentioned pregnancy. Never mentioned giving away 2 babies. Orchestrated narrative progression, revealing character connection and protagonist's compassionate intervention. I need to continue showing the twins revealing details about Rebecca that prove their connection. This chapter should focus on building Richard's belief in their story while also showing the immediate practical steps he takes to help them. I need to maintain the focus on kindness and acceptance without refusal of help. They reached his townhouse on Chestnut Street. It was a 4-story brick building with white columns and black shutters. The kind of place that spoke of old money and careful preservation. Richard had bought it for Rebecca because she loved the history of Beacon Hill, the gas lamps and cobblestone streets. Inside, the house was exactly as she had left it. Richard had not changed anything. Her books still lined the shelves. Her art still hung on the walls. Her favorite blanket still draped over the living room sofa. The twins walked in slowly, looking around with wide eyes. They were dripping on the hardwood floors, shivering despite the blankets. "Let me show you the guest rooms upstairs," Richard said. "You can shower and change. I'll find some clothes that might fit." "We don't have anything to change into," Molly said quietly. "That's okay. We'll figure it out." Richard led them up the curved staircase to the 3rd floor, where 2 guest bedrooms faced each other across the hall. "Pick whichever rooms you want." The twins looked at each other again, that silent twin communication that needed no words. "Can we share one?" Katie asked. "We've always shared." "Of course." Richard showed them into the larger room with 2 twin beds. It had cream walls and tall windows overlooking the street. Rebecca had decorated it for visiting family that never came. "The bathroom is through that door. Take your time. I'll be downstairs." He left them and went to his study. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. He needed to call someone. The police? A lawyer? A social worker? What did you do when 2 children showed up claiming to be your dead wife's secret daughters? Instead, he found himself pulling up his photos. Pictures of Rebecca. He scrolled back through 7 years of memories, looking for any sign he had missed, any hint of the secret she carried. Then he found it. A photo from 2 years ago, right after her first cancer diagnosis. She was sitting in their garden, her expression sad and distant. He had asked her what she was thinking about. She had said, "The things I should have done differently." He had assumed she meant her health choices. Not enough exercise. Too much stress. But now he wondered if she was thinking about 2 little girls she gave away and never got to raise. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Tom Richards, his business partner and closest friend. "Richard, where are you?" Tom's voice was concerned. "You missed the board meeting." "I'm at home. Something came up." "On the anniversary? Are you okay?" Richard looked at the ceiling, hearing water running in the pipes. 2 strangers showering in his house. 2 children who might be his connection to Rebecca. "I don't know. Can you come over?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Richard hung up and walked to Rebecca's reading room. It was a small space on the 2nd floor with a window seat and built-in bookshelves. Her favorite place in the house. He sat where she used to sit and looked out at the rainy Boston street. "Thank you," a small voice said. He turned. Molly stood in the doorway, wrapped in a bathrobe that was far too big for her. Her wet hair was combed back from her face. Without the dirt and grime, Richard could see the resemblance more clearly. She had Rebecca's nose, her cheekbones, the shape of her jaw. "You're welcome," Richard said. "I know this is crazy," Molly continued. "I know you have no reason to believe us. But everything we told you is true. Mama Rebecca found us. She visited us. She told us about you and about her life and about how much she wished things had been different." "Why did you wait so long to come here?" Richard asked. "She died a year ago." Molly looked down at her feet. "We were scared. And the group home wouldn't let us leave. We tried to tell the social workers, but no one believed us. They thought we made it up. So we waited until we could run away." "You can't just run away from a group home. People will be looking for you." "We know. But Mama Rebecca said you would take care of it. She said you would take care of us." Tom Richards arrived 20 minutes later with bags of Chinese takeout and questions Richard was not ready to answer. He was a short man with graying hair and a quick smile, the kind of person who put everyone at ease. He had been Richard's best friend since college. "Okay, what's going on?" Tom asked as Richard let him in. "You sounded strange on the phone." Before Richard could answer, Katie appeared at the top of the stairs. She wore one of Rebecca's old sweaters that hung down to her knees and a pair of sweatpants Richard had found. Her hair was still damp but clean. Tom stopped mid-step. "Who is that?" "It's complicated," Richard said. They sat in the kitchen, all four of them, picking at moose shoe pork and fried rice while Richard explained what happened at the cemetery. Tom listened without interrupting, his expression moving from shock to disbelief to concern. "You need to call the police," Tom said finally. "These kids ran away from a group home. That's serious." "I know. But I need to verify their story first." "How?" "Rebecca is gone." "DNA test," Richard said. He had been thinking about it all morning. If they are really Rebecca's daughters, it will show a genetic connection to her. I can use samples from her hairbrush. Tom nodded slowly. "That's smart. But even if the test proves they are related to Rebecca, that doesn't mean you should get involved. This is a custody situation. Social services. Foster care. It's a whole complicated system." "Rebecca wanted me to help them," Richard said quietly. "Rebecca is dead, Richard. I'm sorry to be blunt, but you can't know what she really wanted. These kids show up with a convenient story right at your most vulnerable moment. I'm not saying they are lying, but you need to be careful." Richard looked at the twins. They sat close together, eating slowly, like they were not sure when their next meal would come. Katie caught his eye and gave him a small, uncertain smile. "I'm calling my lawyer," Richard said. "And my doctor. We'll do this the right way. But I'm not sending them back until we know the truth." 2 hours later, Dr. Sarah Palmer sat in Richard's living room. She was a family physician who had treated both Richard and Rebecca for years. A kind woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her dark hair. "This is highly unusual," Dr. Palmer said as she prepared the DNA collection kits. "But I understand why you want answers quickly." She took cheek swabs from both twins and carefully collected hair samples from Rebecca's preserved belongings. "I'll send these to the lab I trust. They can expedite the results, but it will still take 3 to 5 days. Can you do it in less?" Richard asked. "For something this important, I'll see what I can do." After Dr. Palmer left, Richard called his lawyer, James Mitchell. James was a sharp corporate attorney who had handled Richard's business dealings for a decade. He was less enthusiastic about the situation. "Richard, I need to be honest with you," James said over the phone. "Even if these girls are biologically related to Rebecca, that doesn't give you any legal rights to them. They are wards of the state. The group home has custody. By keeping them here, you're technically harboring runaways. So what should I do?" "Call Child Protective Services. Report that the girls came to you. Cooperate fully. If the DNA proves they're Rebecca's daughters, we can start custody proceedings. But you have to go through the proper channels." Richard hung up and looked at Katie and Molly, who were now sitting on the living room floor, looking through a photo album they had found. It was Rebecca's album from their honeymoon in Italy. "That's the Trevi Fountain," Molly said, pointing. "Mama Rebecca told us about throwing coins in and making wishes." "She wished for children," Katie added softly. "She told us that. She said she threw 3 coins and wished for babies she could keep." The words cut through Richard like glass. Rebecca had wanted children. They had tried for 2 years before the cancer came back. She never complained, never blamed, never mentioned that she already had daughters somewhere in the world. "I need to make a call," Richard said. "It's important. I need to report that you're here." Fear flashed across both girls' faces. "You're sending us back?" Katie asked. "No. But we have to do this right. We have to follow the rules. Otherwise, I can't help you properly." He called Child Protective Services and spoke to a woman named Mrs. Patricia Coleman. She was calm and professional, even when Richard explained the unusual situation. "I'll need to come by tomorrow morning," Mrs. Coleman said. "I'll need to interview the girls and assess the situation. The group home in Providence has been looking for them. They filed a missing persons report 3 days ago. Will you take them away?" "That depends on many factors, Mr. Bennett. The girls' wishes, their safety, the validity of their claims, and whether you're a suitable temporary placement. We'll figure it out. That night, Richard lay awake in his bedroom, listening to the old house settle around him. Downstairs, the twins slept in the guest room. Or at least, he hoped they slept. He wondered if they were scared, if they regretted coming to him. He thought about Rebecca lying in a hospital bed, knowing she was dying, carrying the weight of a secret she never fully shared. He thought about her seeking out the daughters she gave away, trying to make amends in the time she had left. And he thought about the wish she made at the Trevi fountain, throwing coins into the water, hoping for children she could keep. Maybe this was God's way of answering that wish. Just not the way anyone expected. Mrs. Patricia Coleman arrived at 8 the next morning with a clipboard and a kind face. She was an African-American woman in her 40s with short natural hair and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a professional blazer and had the air of someone who had seen everything. "Thank you for calling, Mr. Bennett," she said as Richard let her in. "Many people in your position would not have been so responsible." The twins sat on the living room sofa, their hands clasped together. They looked terrified. Richard wanted to reassure them, but he did not know what promises he could make. Mrs. Coleman interviewed the girls separately, then together, then spoke with Richard alone in his study. She took notes constantly, her expression neutral. "Their story is consistent," she said, "and unusual enough that I don't think they fabricated it. But I've contacted the group home in Providence. The director, Mrs. Henderson, says Katie and Molly have a history of behavioral issues. Running away, fighting with other kids. They've been difficult placements." "Did Mrs. Henderson mention why they might have behavioral issues?" Richard asked. "What their background is?" Mrs. Coleman consulted her notes. They entered the system at age 7 when their adoptive parents died in a car accident. They've been in 6 different foster homes and 2 group homes since then. No family members able or willing to take them. It's a sad case. "Rebecca found them 3 months before she died," Richard said. "She visited them 4 times. Don't those visits have to be documented some way?" "I'm looking into that. If your wife visited a group home multiple times, there should be records, sign-in sheets, background checks. But it's possible she met them somewhere else, or that the visits weren't officially documented." Richard felt frustration building. "So what happens now?" "The DNA test is the key," Mrs. Coleman said. "If it proves they are related to your late wife, that changes everything. It establishes a connection. It validates their story. And it gives you grounds to pursue custody, if that's what you want." "It is." Mrs. Coleman looked at him carefully. "Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your willingness to help. But taking in 2 traumatized 12-year-olds is a serious commitment. They need therapy, structure, patience, and they need someone who is emotionally prepared to handle their needs. Are you that person?" Richard thought about the past year, the loneliness, the grief, the way he threw himself into work because the house felt too empty. He thought about how he had no idea what to do with 2 children, no experience, no training. But he also thought about Rebecca's wish, about her dying words in the letter, about the way Katie and Molly looked at him with hope in their eyes. "I want to try," he said. Mrs. Coleman nodded. "Then here's what we do. I'm going to approve a temporary placement. The girls can stay with you while we wait for the DNA results and do a home study. I'll be checking in regularly. You'll need to enroll them in school. Get them proper clothing and supplies. Maybe consider a therapist who specializes in trauma and attachment issues." "I can do that." "One more thing," Mrs. Coleman added. "The group home wants them back." Mrs. Henderson was quite insistent. "If the DNA test doesn't prove a connection, or if I determine this placement isn't working, they'll have to return to Providence." After Mrs. Coleman left, Richard sat down with Katie and Molly. They looked at him with identical expressions of worry. "You can stay," Richard said simply. "For now, while we wait for the test results and figure things out properly." The relief on their faces was immediate. Molly started crying. Katie hugged her sister, then looked at Richard with tears in her own eyes. "Thank you," Katie whispered. "You don't know what this means to us." "We'll be good," Molly added quickly. "We promise. We won't cause any trouble." "I'm not worried about that," Richard said, though he wondered if he should be. I'm more worried about figuring out how to take care of you. I've never been a parent before. Mama Rebecca said you would figure it out, Katie said. She said you were the kind of person who always found solutions. Over the next 3 days, Richard learned that parenting was nothing like running a technology company. There were no clear metrics for success, no quarterly reports, no board meetings to present progress. Instead, there were trips to Target for clothes and toiletries. There was learning that 12-year-old girls needed different shampoo than adults. There was discovering that Katie was allergic to strawberries and Molly was afraid of thunderstorms. Tom came by every day, bringing food and advice. His own kids were grown now, but he remembered the chaos of raising them. You need help, Tom said on the third day. Real help. Someone who knows what they are doing. That afternoon, Richard's housekeeper, Mrs. Helen Crawford, arrived for her usual Thursday shift. She was a sturdy woman in her 60s with silver hair and a Boston accent. She had worked for Richard and Rebecca for 5 years. Mrs. Crawford stopped in the doorway when she saw the twins. What's all this then? Richard explained the situation. Mrs. Crawford listened with her hands on her hips, her expression softening as the story unfolded. Rebecca had daughters, she said finally. Well, I'll be. That woman kept her secrets close. Can you help? Richard asked. I'm completely out of my depth here. Mrs. Crawford looked at the twins, who stood uncertainly in the kitchen. She walked over and looked them up and down. You girls know how to make a bed. They nodded. You know how to fold laundry. Yes, Katie said. Good. Because if you're staying here, you're going to help with chores. Mr. Bennett might be rich, but that doesn't mean he needs people sitting around doing nothing. Understood? Yes, both girls said together. Mrs. Crawford smiled for the first time. Then we'll get along just fine. On the 5th day, Dr. Palmer called. Richard, the results are back. Can you come to my office? Richard drove to the medical building with the twins in the back seat. They were quiet, nervous. Everything depended on this moment. If the test was negative, they would go back to Providence, back to a system that had failed them over and over. Dr. Palmer's office was small and comfortable, with watercolor paintings on the walls. She gestured for them all to sit. The DNA test is conclusive, she said, looking at Richard. Katie and Molly are biologically related to Rebecca. They share maternal DNA markers that prove they are her daughters. The room seemed to exhale. Richard felt tears prick his eyes. The twins grabbed each other's hands. They are really hers, Richard said. They are really hers, Dr. Palmer confirmed. I'm sorry Rebecca never told you, but these girls are telling the truth. Richard called Mrs. Coleman immediately. Then James Mitchell. The wheels of legal process began to turn. Custody petitions, home studies, background checks. It would take time. But now, at least, there was a path forward. That night, Richard took the twins to Rebecca's grave. They brought flowers. White roses, her favorite. Thank you, Mama, Katie whispered, kneeling by the headstone. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for sending us to him. Richard stood in the November cold and felt something shift in his chest. For the first year, grief had felt like drowning, like being pulled under by waves he could not fight. But now, looking at these two girls, he felt something different. Purpose. Rebecca could not raise her daughters, but she had trusted him to do it for her, and he would not let her down. The first day of school was harder than Richard expected. He woke the twins at 6:30, made breakfast that neither of them ate, and drove them to Boston Latin Academy, while they sat in terrified silence. It's going to be okay, Richard said as they pulled up to the prestigious brick building. It was one of the best public schools in Boston, and he had pulled strings to get them enrolled mid-semester. Everyone is excited to meet you. We don't know how to be around normal kids, Molly said quietly. We've been in group homes for 5 years. We don't know how to act. Just be yourselves, Richard said, though he knew it was inadequate advice. He walked them to the main office, where Principal Anderson waited. She was a tall woman with kind eyes who had listened to the twins' story without judgment. Welcome, Katie and Molly, she said warmly. We're glad you're here. I've assigned you both to Mrs. Turner's 7th grade class. She's wonderful with new students. Richard kissed both girls on the forehead, something he had started doing without thinking about it. "I'll pick you up at 3. Call me if you need anything." He left them there and drove to his office in downtown Boston, where his technology company occupied 3 floors of a modern glass building. His assistant, Jennifer Chen, looked up in surprise when he walked in. "Richard, you're here. We weren't expecting you for another week." "I needed to work," Richard said. It was partly true. He also needed space to think. Space to process the enormity of what was happening. Tom found him an hour later, staring at spreadsheets he was not really seeing. "How did drop-off go?" Tom asked. "They were scared. I was scared. I have no idea what I'm doing." "None of us do," Tom said. "We just fake it until the kids turn 18 and move out." He sat down across from Richard. "But seriously, you need more support. Have you thought about a nanny? Or an au pair?" "Mrs. Crawford is helping." Mrs. Crawford is a housekeeper, not a child care provider. These girls need someone who can focus on them full-time. Richard knew Tom was right. But the thought of bringing another stranger into the situation felt overwhelming. He was still learning the twins' habits, their triggers, their needs. At 3 o'clock, he picked them up from school. They climbed into the car, with mixed expressions. "How was it?" Richard asked. "Weird," Katie said. "Everyone kept staring at us." "They were nice though," Molly added. "Some girls invited us to sit with them at lunch." "That's good. Did you make any friends?" The twins looked at each other. "Maybe," Katie said cautiously. "There's a girl named Hannah who was really friendly. She said we should join the art club." Over the next week, Richard discovered that his decision to take in the twins had not gone unnoticed in the community. Mrs. Crawford spread the word at church. Tom mentioned it to colleagues. Principal Anderson told other parents. The response was overwhelming. A woman named Carol Stevens knocked on the door on Tuesday with bags of clothes. "My daughter just outgrew these," she said. "I heard you were taking care of 2 girls. Please, take them." On Wednesday, 3 families from the girls' school sent care packages. Notebooks, pens, art supplies, books. "Welcome to the neighborhood," the card said. On Thursday, Mrs. Crawford's church group organized a donation drive. They showed up with boxes of winter coats, boots, gloves, and scarves. The twins stood in the foyer, stunned by the generosity. "Why are people being so nice?" Molly asked. "Because that's what communities do," Mrs. Crawford said firmly. "They take care of their own." Richard's business partner Tom arranged for his wife, Susan, to take the twins shopping for personal items. Susan was a warm, energetic woman who had raised 3 daughters. She picked up Katie and Molly on Saturday morning with a smile. "We're going to have fun today," Susan declared. "And we're going to make sure you have everything you need." They returned 6 hours later with bags from Target, CVS, and a local bookstore. The twins looked exhausted but happy. "Susan bought us so much stuff," Katie said. "We told her it was too much, but she wouldn't listen." "Good," Richard said. He pulled Susan aside while the twins unpacked their bags. "Thank you. Really." "Oh, honey," Susan said, patting his arm. "You're doing a beautiful thing. Rebecca would be so proud." That night, James Mitchell called with an update on the custody petition. The court date is set for 3 weeks from now. Mrs. Coleman's home study is positive. The DNA results are solid. Unless something unexpected happens, I think the judge will grant you guardianship. What about the group home? Are they still contesting? Mrs. Henderson has backed off. I think she realized she couldn't win against DNA evidence and a wealthy guardian who can provide a stable home. But there's something else you should know. Richard tensed. What? Rebecca's brother Frank reached out to my office. He wants to talk to you about the twins. Richard felt his stomach drop. I didn't know Rebecca had a brother. She didn't talk about him much, did she? There's a reason for that. Frank Morrison has a history of financial problems and legal issues. Rebecca cut him off years ago after he tried to borrow money one too many times. What does he want with the twins? I don't know. But be careful. Men like Frank smell opportunity when they see it. Richard hung up feeling uneasy. He walked upstairs to check on the girls. They were in their room, now decorated with posters and photos they had chosen. Katie was reading. Molly was drawing in a sketchbook someone had donated. "Everything okay?" Molly asked, looking up. "Everything's fine," Richard lied. He did not want to worry them about Frank. "Not yet. Just checking in. Do you need anything?" "No," Katie said. She closed her book and looked at him seriously. "But we need to say something. Thank you. For everything. For believing us. For taking us in. For not sending us back. We know we're a lot of trouble." "You're not trouble," Richard said. "You're family." The word slipped out before he thought about it. But once it was said, he realized it was true. These girls were family. Not because of blood or obligation, but because Rebecca loved them. And because he was learning to love them too. December arrived with snow and preparations for the twins' first Christmas in a real home. Richard had not celebrated the holiday since Rebecca died. Last year, he spent December 25th alone, eating takeout and avoiding his neighbors' pitying looks. This year felt different. Katie and Molly walked through the house with wonder, touching the decorations Mrs. Crawford put up, marveling at the tree Tom helped Richard choose. "Is this all for us?" Molly asked, staring at the presents already accumulating under the tree. "Some of them," Richard admitted. The community had continued sending gifts. Sweaters, books, art supplies, board games. People want you to feel welcome. But despite the outward signs of adjustment, Richard noticed troubling patterns. Katie woke up screaming most nights. Molly hoarded food in her dresser drawer. Both girls flinched when he raised his voice, even slightly. Mrs. Crawford noticed too. "Those babies need therapy," she said bluntly one morning. "They've been through too much to just bounce back." Richard called Dr. Paula Morrison, a child psychologist James Mitchell recommended. She had kind eyes and a calming presence. She met with each twin separately, then together, then gave Richard her assessment. "They are dealing with complex trauma," Dr. Morrison said. "Abandonment. Loss. Instability. The foster care system did its best, but these girls have been moved around too much. They don't trust that good things will last." "How do I help them?" Consistency. Patience. Therapy twice a week for the foreseeable future. And you need to prepare yourself for the fact that healing is not linear. They'll have bad days. Setbacks. Moments where they push you away to see if you'll stay. Richard nodded. "I'll stay." One evening in mid-December, Katie asked if she could talk to him privately. They sat in Rebecca's reading room, where Richard still felt closest to his late wife. "I need to tell you something," Katie said. Her voice was shaky. "About how we really found Mama Rebecca." Richard tensed. "I thought you told me everything." "We told you most of it, but not all." Katie looked down at her hands. "When Mama Rebecca came to the group home, she didn't just visit us. She gave us letters. One for each time she came. 4 letters total. She made us promise to read them in order and to wait until after she died to come find you." "Where are these letters?" Katie pulled a worn envelope from her pocket. "We didn't show you before because we were scared. Scared you would think we were just after your money or something. But you've been so kind. You deserve to know everything." Richard opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were 4 letters in Rebecca's handwriting, dated from the months before she died. The first letter explained how Rebecca hired a private investigator to find the daughters she gave up. How it took months of searching through sealed adoption records. How she nearly gave up before discovering they were in Providence. The second letter described her first visit to the group home. How her heart broke seeing Katie and Molly in that environment. How she wanted to take them immediately, but knew she did not have time to go through proper legal channels. The third letter was harder to read. Rebecca detailed her worsening condition, her fear of dying, her regret over not telling Richard the truth, but also her certainty that he was the right person to care for her daughters. The fourth letter was addressed to Richard directly. "My dearest Richard," it began. "If you are reading this, then my daughters found you. Thank you for not turning them away. I know this is unexpected. I know I should have told you about them when I was alive. But shame is a powerful thing, and I carried mine for too long. These girls are pieces of my heart I thought I lost forever. Finding them again was God's grace. But I am running out of time. I need to know they will be safe. I need to know they will be loved. And there is no one in this world I trust more than you. Please, Richard. If you ever loved me, love them. They are good girls who have been hurt by circumstances beyond their control. They need stability. They need kindness. They need someone who won't give up on them. Orchestrated emotional narrative arc balancing redemption themes and forthcoming conflict. This is a powerful moment in the story. I need to continue building the emotional depth while maintaining the themes of redemption, second chances, and divine favor. The letter from Rebecca should be heartfelt without being overly flowery. I should also prepare for introducing the conflict with Frank in upcoming chapters. I have left instructions with my lawyer about my estate. There is a trust fund set aside for the girls. It is not much compared to what you have, but it is something. Use it for their education, their future, their dreams. I am sorry for keeping this secret. I am sorry for leaving you alone. But I am grateful beyond words that you existed in my life. You made me believe I was worthy of love, even with all my mistakes. Take care of our daughters, Richard. Because that is what they are now. Ours. Not just by blood, but by choice and love and second chances. Forever grateful, Rebecca. Richard read the letter 3 times. When he looked up, tears were streaming down Katie's face. She really loved you, Katie said. She talked about you like you were the best person in the world. She was wrong, Richard said quietly. She was the best person. I was just lucky she chose me. Will you really keep us? Molly asked from the doorway. She had been listening. Even now that you know everything. Richard stood and walked to where both girls stood together, unified as always. He pulled them into a hug, these daughters that were not his but somehow were. I will keep you, he said. No matter what happens. No matter how hard it gets. You are not going back. You are staying right here. That night, Richard sat in the reading room and wrote his own letter. He addressed it to Rebecca, knowing she would never read it. Knowing it was more for himself than anyone else. I understand now, he wrote. Why you kept this secret. Why you carried the guilt. But I wish you had trusted me with the truth. I would have loved you just the same. I would have helped you find them sooner. Our daughters are struggling. But they are strong. Just like you. And I promise I will do everything in my power to give them the life you wanted them to have. The life you would have given them if you had been given more time. I miss you every day. But finding Katie and Molly has given me a reason to keep going. They have brought light back into this house. They have reminded me that life continues even after loss. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for sending them to me. Thank you for the gift of second chances. I love you. I will always love you. And I will love the daughters you left behind. Richard folded the letter and placed it in Rebecca's favorite book, a collection of poetry she read over and over. He would keep it there, along with all the other pieces of her he was learning to hold without breaking. The custody hearing was scheduled for January 15th. As the date approached, Richard threw himself into preparing the perfect case. James Mitchell filed mountains of paperwork. Mrs. Coleman provided glowing reports. Dr. Morrison submitted professional recommendations. But something was changing in Richard. It was not just about keeping Katie and Molly anymore. It was about all the other children out there, lost in the system, waiting for someone to find them. I want to start a foundation, he told Tom one morning in early January. They sat in Richard's office, looking out at the Boston skyline. In Rebecca's name. To help reunite families. To support kids aging out of foster care. To make sure what happened to Katie and Molly doesn't happen to others. Tom leaned back in his chair. That's ambitious. What kind of budget are you thinking? But what if they don't? Katie pressed. Richard took both their hands. Then I will fight. I will appeal. I will do whatever it takes. I am not giving up on you. Ever. They sat together in the quiet house, holding on to each other and hoping that love and truth would be enough. The Suffolk County Family Court was busy on the morning of January 15th. Richard arrived with the twins, James Mitchell, and Mrs. Coleman. They sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, waiting for their case to be called. Katie and Molly wore matching blue dresses that Susan Richards had helped them pick out. They looked nervous but determined. Richard held both their hands. Whatever happens in there, tell the truth, he reminded them. That's all you need to do. James reviewed his notes one more time. The judge is Elizabeth Warren. She's fair but thorough. She'll want to hear from the girls directly. When their names were called, they filed into the courtroom. It was smaller than Richard expected, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights. Judge Warren sat at the bench, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with sharp eyes. But Richard's attention was caught by the man sitting at the other table. He was in his 40s, with thinning hair and an expensive suit that did not quite fit right. He looked familiar in a way Richard could not place. Who is that? Richard whispered to James. James checked his notes and frowned. That's Frank Morrison, Rebecca's brother. He filed a last-minute motion to intervene in the case. Richard felt ice in his stomach. On what grounds? His claiming he's the twins' closest living relative. His petitioning for custody himself. Judge Warren called the court to order. This is a guardianship petition brought by Richard Bennett for Katie and Molly Thompson. I see we also have an intervention motion from Frank Morrison. Let's address that first. Frank's lawyer stood. He was a slick man with a practiced smile. Your Honor, my client is Rebecca Bennett's biological brother. That makes him the twins' maternal uncle. He believes the children should be placed with family, not a stranger with no biological connection. James stood immediately. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison has not seen his sister in over 8 years. He has no relationship with these children. His sudden interest in custody appears opportunistic at best. Mr. Morrison, Judge Warren said, looking at Frank directly. Why are you seeking custody of these children? Frank stood, his expression earnest. Your Honor, my sister Rebecca was my only sibling. We had our differences, but family is family. When I learned about Katie and Molly, I knew it was my duty to step up. They deserve to be raised by someone with a blood connection to their mother. And you're prepared to care for two 12-year-old girls? Absolutely, Your Honor. I have a home in Newton. Stable employment. I'm ready to provide them with everything they need. Judge Warren looked at James. Mr. Mitchell, what's your response? We oppose Mr. Morrison's intervention on multiple grounds. First, he has not been involved in these girls' lives at all. Second, his relationship with his late sister was estranged due to his pattern of financial exploitation. Third, and most importantly, the girls themselves have expressed a clear preference to remain with Mr. Bennett. The judge looked at Katie and Molly. I'd like to hear from the twins. Katie, can you tell me how you feel about this situation? Katie stood, her voice shaking but clear. Your Honor, we never met Mr. Morrison before today. We didn't even know Mama Rebecca had a brother. She never mentioned him. But she told us all about Mr. Bennett. She said he was kind and good and that he would take care of us. We want to stay with him. Molly, do you agree with your sister? Yes, Your Honor, Molly said. Mr. Bennett has been like a real dad to us. He took us in when we had nowhere to go. He believed us when nobody else did. We don't want to leave him. Judge Warren made notes. Mr. Morrison, when did you last have contact with your sister? Frank hesitated. It's been several years. We had some disagreements. What kind of disagreements? Just family stuff. Nothing serious. James stood again. Your Honor, I have documentation of Mr. Morrison's history with his sister. Multiple requests for loans that were never repaid. Attempts to access her accounts. A restraining order filed 3 years before her death after he showed up at her home demanding money. Frank's face reddened. That's exaggerated. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that resulted in a legal order barring you from contact with your sister. James pulled out documents. I have the court records right here. Judge Warren held out her hand. Let me see those. While the judge reviewed the paperwork, Richard watched Frank. The man's smooth expression was cracking. He kept glancing at the twins with an intensity that made Richard uncomfortable. After several minutes, Judge Warren looked up. Mr. Morrison, these records paint a troubling picture. You have a history of financial instability, multiple evictions, unpaid debts, and most concerning, a pattern of exploiting your sister for money. Why should I believe your sudden interest in these children is genuine? Because they're family, Frank insisted. And because Rebecca would want them to be with her own blood. Actually, James interrupted, we have evidence that Rebecca specifically did not want Mr. Morrison involved in her daughter's lives. He handed the judge a copy of Rebecca's letter to Richard. This letter, written by Rebecca Bennett in the months before her death, explicitly states a wish for Richard Bennett to care for her daughters. She makes no mention of her brother. Judge Warren read the letter carefully. When she finished, she looked at Frank with obvious skepticism. Mr. Morrison, I'm denying your motion to intervene. Your petition for custody is dismissed. The restraining order your sister filed, combined with your financial history and lack of relationship with these children, makes you an unsuitable guardian. Frank shot to his feet. This is wrong. Those girls are worth millions. Rebecca's estate, her trust funds. They should stay in the family. The courtroom went silent. Judge Warren's expression hardened. I beg your pardon? Did you just admit your interest in these children is financial? Frank realized his mistake. His lawyer grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back down, but the damage was done. I just meant that Rebecca's assets should benefit her blood relatives, Frank stammered. Get out of my courtroom, Judge Warren said coldly. And if you make any further attempts to contact these children or interfere with this case, I will hold you in contempt. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Morrison out. As Frank was led away, still protesting, Richard felt Katie and Molly grip his hands tighter. They were shaking. It's okay, he whispered. He's gone. He can't hurt you. Judge Warren turned her attention back to the main case. She interviewed Mrs. Coleman about the home study. She reviewed Dr. Morrison's psychological evaluations. She asked Richard about his plans for the girl's future. Finally, after 2 hours of testimony and questions, Judge Warren made her ruling. I've reviewed all the evidence in this case. The DNA results proving Katie and Molly's biological relationship to Rebecca Bennett. The testimony about Rebecca's wishes. The home study showing Mr. Bennett's suitability as a guardian. The girl's own clear preference. I'm granting Richard Bennett full legal guardianship of Katie and Molly Thompson, effective immediately. This guardianship includes all parental rights and responsibilities. The children will remain in Mr. Bennett's custody. Furthermore, I'm issuing a protective order against Frank Morrison. He is barred from contacting the children or Mr. Bennett for the duration of the twins' minority. Mr. Bennett, these girls are now legally your daughters. I trust you will continue to provide them with the love and stability they deserve. The gavel came down. Katie and Molly burst into tears. Richard pulled them into a hug, feeling his own tears fall. We're family, he said. It's official. We're a family. Outside the courtroom, James shook Richard's hand. Congratulations. Though I have to say, Frank Morrison showed his true colors in there. Do you think he'll cause more problems? Richard asked. With that protective order in place? I doubt it. But keep your guard up. Men like Frank don't give up easily when they think there's money involved. That night, Richard took Katie and Molly to their favorite restaurant in the North End. They ate pasta and celebrated with sparkling cider. Other diners noticed their happiness and smiled. When they got home, Mrs. Crawford was waiting with a cake she had baked. Congratulations to our family, she said, hugging the twins. You girls are officially Bennetts now. But as Richard put the girls to bed that night, he could not shake the feeling that Frank's outburst in court was not the end. The way Frank had looked at the twins, the way he mentioned money and estates, it all felt calculated. Like Frank had revealed his intentions by accident, but those intentions were still very much alive. Richard made a mental note to call James in the morning. They needed to review Rebecca's will and the twins' trust funds. They needed to make sure everything was protected. Because if Frank Morrison wanted to exploit his nieces for money, Richard was going to make sure that never happened. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, Richard began noticing strange things. A car that seemed to follow them to school. Someone asking the girls questions at the park. Small inconsistencies in financial records related to Rebecca's estate. He called James Mitchell. I think Frank is still snooping around. I'll hire a private investigator, James said. If he's violating the protective order, we need documentation. The investigator James recommended was Laura Mitchell, no relation despite the shared last name. She was a former Boston police detective with sharp instincts and 20 years of experience. Laura met with Richard in his office. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and steady eyes. "Tell me everything," she said. Richard explained the situation. The custody battle. Frank's outburst. The strange feeling of being watched. "I'll look into Mr. Morrison's activities," Laura said. "His finances, his associates, his movements. If he's planning something, I'll find out." 2 days later, Laura called Richard with disturbing news. Frank Morrison has been talking to a lawyer about contesting Rebecca's will. He's claiming she was mentally unstable when she wrote it due to her cancer treatment. He wants to have the will invalidated. Can he do that? He can try. It's a long shot, but if he succeeds, Rebecca's estate would be divided according to Massachusetts intestacy laws. As her brother, he would get a portion. And as the twins' guardian, he would want control over their trust funds. The judge already denied his custody petition. That doesn't stop him from going after the money through other legal channels. He's arguing that even if you have custody, the finances should be managed by a blood relative. Richard felt anger rising. This is about stealing from his own nieces. Yes, but we need proof. I'm going to dig deeper into his finances. See if there's a pattern of this kind of behavior. Over the next week, Laura uncovered troubling information. Frank Morrison had a history of preying on vulnerable relatives. An elderly aunt whose accounts he drained before she died. A cousin whose inheritance mysteriously disappeared after Frank was appointed executor. This man is a predator, Laura told Richard. He targets family members who can't fight back. And now he's targeting Katie and Molly. What do? We expose him. I'll compile everything I've found and present it to your lawyer. If Frank files to contest the will, we'll be ready with evidence of his pattern of financial exploitation. But Frank moved faster than expected. One afternoon in late February, Richard got a call from Katie's school. She and Molly had not shown up to their last class. Richard's heart stopped. What do you mean they didn't show up? They left the building during lunch, Principal Anderson said, her voice tight with concern. Security footage shows them getting into a car with a man. We couldn't see the license plate, but the description matches Frank Morrison. Richard called the police immediately. Then James. Then Laura. Within an hour, an Amber Alert was issued. Police flooded the streets looking for Frank's vehicle. Richard drove through Boston in a panic, calling Katie's cell phone over and over. It went straight to voicemail. Molly's did the same. How could this happen? The school had been notified about the protective order. Frank was not supposed to be anywhere near the girls. But somehow he had gotten to them anyway. At 5 o'clock, Laura called. I found them. Frank took them to a motel in Revere. The police are on their way. I'm coming too. Richard, let the police handle this. Those are my daughters. I'm coming. He drove to Revere with his hands shaking on the wheel. When he arrived at the motel, police cars surrounded the building. Officers had their weapons drawn, though Richard noticed they were not pointing them at the building. No weapons in this story, he remembered. Just people making choices. Detective Sarah Martinez approached Richard. Mr. Bennett, you need to stay back. Are the girls okay? Is he hurting them? We don't think so. He's been talking to our negotiator. He says he just wants what's rightfully his. He's trying to use the girls as leverage to force a financial settlement. He kidnapped them for money. Essentially, yes. But we're going to get them out safely. For 2 hours, Richard waited while police negotiators talked to Frank. The cold February air bit through his coat, but he did not leave. Could not leave. Not while Katie and Molly were in danger. Finally, movement. The motel room door opened. Frank walked out with his hands up. Behind him, 2 police officers emerged with Katie and Molly. The girls looked scared but unhurt. Richard ran forward, ignoring the officers who tried to stop him. He reached the twins and pulled them into his arms. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? We're okay, Katie said, crying. He didn't hurt us. He just kept saying we needed to sign some papers. That we had to give him money that belonged to Mama Rebecca. We didn't sign anything, Molly added. We said no. We said you were our dad now, and we didn't owe him anything. Frank was put in handcuffs and led to a police car. As he passed Richard, he spat out, "Those girls are sitting on millions. Rebecca's estate should stay in the family. You're just some outsider who got lucky." "No," Richard said quietly. "I'm their father. And you're never getting near them again." Frank was charged with kidnapping, violating a protective order, and attempted extortion. His bail was set high. His lawyer tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, that Frank was just trying to discuss family finances. But the evidence was overwhelming. Laura's investigation revealed years of financial abuse. The district attorney was interested in prosecuting Frank for crimes related to his other relatives as well. Frank Morrison's predatory behavior was finally catching up with him. That night, back home with the twins safe in their beds, Richard sat in the dark living room and tried to calm his racing heart. He had come so close to losing them. So close to Frank succeeding in his twisted plan. Mrs. Crawford brought him tea. "Those girls are tougher than they look," she said. "They stood up to that man. Refused to cooperate. They knew what he was doing was wrong." "Rebecca would be proud of them," Richard said. "She'd be proud of you too. You fought for them. You kept them safe. You gave them a family." Richard looked at the staircase, where Katie and Molly were sleeping. Despite everything they had been through, they were here. They were safe. They were his. And no one was going to take them away. The trial took place in April. Frank Morrison faced multiple charges, and the evidence against him was extensive. Laura Mitchell testified about her investigation. The elderly aunt's caretaker testified about Frank's manipulation. Handwriting experts confirmed forged documents. Richard and the twins attended every day of the trial. Katie and Molly had to testify about the kidnapping, describing how Frank approached them at school, how he lied about Richard sending him, how he took them to the motel and tried to force them to sign papers they did not understand. "He kept saying we were rich," Katie told the prosecutor. "He said we had more money than we knew what to do with. He said it was only fair that family should get a share." "What did you say?" the prosecutor asked. "We said no. We said Mr. Bennett was our family now. We said Mama Rebecca wanted him to take care of us, not Frank." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, they found Frank Morrison guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison and ordered him to pay restitution to his previous victims. As Frank was led away, he looked at Richard one last time. There was no remorse in his eyes, only bitterness that his plan had failed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Richard made a brief statement. This was never about money. It was about protecting 2 girls who have already been through too much. Justice was served today, and our family can finally move forward. That evening, Richard took Katie and Molly to Rebecca's grave. It was a warm April day, and the cemetery was blooming with spring flowers. The memorial garden Richard had commissioned was nearly complete, with benches and paths winding through flower beds. "We wanted to show you something," Katie said. She and Molly had been working on a project in art class. They unrolled a large piece of paper. It was a drawing of their family. Rebecca in the center, smiling. Richard on one side, Katie and Molly on the other, all holding hands. Around the border, they had written words: love, family, hope, second chances, forever. "We're going to frame it and hang it in our room," Molly said, "so we always remember how we got here." Richard felt tears on his face. "Rebecca would love it. She would love knowing you two are happy and safe." They stood together in the spring sunshine, 3 people who had found each other through loss and love. Richard thought about the year that had passed since that rainy November morning. Thought about how his life had changed. How grief had transformed into purpose. How emptiness had been filled with laughter and chaos and the everyday beauty of raising daughters. 1 year later, the Rebecca and Bennett Foundation had helped over 200 families. Kids had been reunited with biological parents who worked hard to get their lives on track. Foster families received support and resources. Teenagers aging out of the system got scholarships and job training. The foundation held its 2nd annual gala in November, exactly 2 years after Richard found the twins at Rebecca's grave. This time, Katie and Molly helped plan the event. They spoke on stage about their journey, about the importance of family, about never giving up hope. "We were homeless and alone," Katie told the audience. We had no reason to believe anyone would care about us. But Mama Rebecca cared. And Mr. Bennett cared. And this whole community cared. That's what changed our lives. Not money or luck, but people choosing to be kind. The gala raised $6 million. Local news covered it extensively. The governor mentioned the foundation in a speech about child welfare reform. What started as one man trying to honor his wife's dying wish had become a movement. At home that night, Richard tucked both girls into bed like he did every night. They were 13 now, growing taller, more confident. Katie wanted to be a lawyer, inspired by James Mitchell. Molly wanted to be an artist, her sketchbooks filled with beautiful drawings. "Dad," Katie said. She had started calling him that 6 months ago, and it still made his heart swell every time. "Do you think Mama Rebecca knows what we're doing? The foundation and everything." "I think she knows," Richard said. "I think she's proud of all of us." "I wish she could be here," Molly said softly. "Me too," Richard agreed. "But in a way, she is here. Every time we help a family reunite. Every time a kid finds a home. Every time we choose love over fear. That's Rebecca living on through us." He kissed both girls on the forehead and turned off the light. As he walked downstairs, he passed the framed drawing they had made, now hanging in the hallway. Rebecca in the center, smiling. Their family, held together by love. Richard had not believed in fate or divine favor before Rebecca died. He had been a practical man who believed in hard work and logic. But finding Katie and Molly at that grave, hearing their story, watching his life transform into something beautiful and meaningful, he could not deny that something larger was at work. Maybe Rebecca had orchestrated it all, finding her daughters before she died and setting events in motion. Maybe it was God answering her prayers. Maybe it was simply love refusing to give up, even in the face of death. Whatever it was, Richard was grateful. Grateful for the twins who brought light back into his darkness. Grateful for the community that rallied around them. Grateful for second chances and new beginnings. He sat in Rebecca's reading room and looked out at the Boston night. Somewhere in the city, there were children like Katie and Molly, waiting for someone to choose them. Waiting for someone to believe they mattered. Waiting for love to find them. And because of Rebecca, because of her daughters, because of the foundation they built, more kids would get that chance. More families would be reunited. More hope would be planted in broken places. Richard thought about the words Rebecca wrote in her final letter, "Love them if you ever loved me." He had loved her. He still loved her. And he loved the daughters she gave him. Not just because she asked him to, but because they were easy to love. Because they were brave and strong and full of possibility. Because they were his. 2 years after finding two homeless twins at his wife's grave, Richard Bennett had become a father. The house that once echoed with loneliness now rang with laughter. The heart that once felt broken had learned to love again. And somewhere, Richard believed, Rebecca was smiling.